My name is Ruby. I have worked in relationships and sex education for a decade, and I've done that in lots of different kinds of ways. I was the person who taught sex ed to your kids in school, if you grew up in this borough, if you live in this borough. And I've worked with a wonderful charity called Brook, which is a sex and relationships charity, and they do lots of healthcare stuff. I'm still proud to be an ambassador for them, even though I don't work with them full time anymore. I do a lot of other stuff about this topic. I feel like I make a tit of myself on the internet quite a lot of the time. And I write as well. My first book is called Sex Ed, A Guide for Adults, and that came out a few years ago. And then most recently, we've got this bad boy. There she is, the Non-Monogamy Playbook. Da, 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 da. Thank you very much. That was a super enthusiastic, no, anyway, I'm joking. So as well as working in this field, I have also not been monogamous for 10 years. I've been living this for a decade now. I feel like 10 years kind of gives me enough standing to write a big-ass book about it. And alongside that, I am a queer person, and for me, like, queerness and doing relationships in slightly funky, unusual ways definitely feels like it goes hand in hand. As well as that, I've just always been really curious to think about the stuff that we're all very British and nervous to talk about. You seem like a lovely, open-minded crowd, but we still all come to sex and relationships with shame and insecurity and that panic of if we're getting it right or if we're normal enough. Don't worry, normal doesn't exist, but we still all have that kind of fear within us. And so any topic that is like somewhat taboo and forbidden, I want to get my teeth stuck into. And I feel like the more we talk about this kind of stuff, the less shame we can start to feel, because we recognize we're all holding our weird versions of shame. Of all the topics that I have spoken about over the last 10 years, non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, this is the thing I get asked about the most by like a country mile. You're all so nosy. You want to know about this. If you're a monogamous person, you want to know about this and you want to ask all the questions that you don't think you're allowed to ask, but actually a lot of them are in that book. And if you are someone who kind of maybe has been taught a certain way of how you should be doing relationships and you're curious to see what the other options might be, I really wanted to create a resource that was open and kind and curious, but also not without sort of criticisms and sneaking in like queer theory and lots of different little bits. So that's kind of the origin story of this book. I just have like innate teacher energy. I'm never going to be able to shift it, so I am going to make you do a raise your hands situation if that is allowed. And also, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, for whatever personal reason. But if you are someone who is not monogamous, if you're a non-monogamous, polyamorous, open relationships babe, and you feel brave, do you want to raise your hand? Hi! 4 and a half of us. 5, 6, 7, I think. Yay! Well, hi, nice to see you. Hey. If you are someone who is not currently non-monogamous, but you've got a little curiosity there, I also realize maybe that might be a vulnerable thing to put your hand up with. But we've got one person. Anyone else who's like, yay, hello? He's like, what's all this about? I'd see. Hi, there's some other people here. If you are a monogamous babe and you are so happy with that and you're going to listen to what I have to say, but you're like, babe, you're not convincing me, raise your hand. Hi. We're friends, don't worry. This isn't a recruitment strategy. I'm not trying to like get you. Wonderful. And actually, let's do a final one for everyone. Raise your hands if you know someone who is doing this in your personal life. Like friend, family member, colleagues. Great. There's a lot of hands up now. And 10 years ago, when I started doing this, like no one's fucking hand would be up. Sorry, there are children here, aren't there? I will not do swearing. I also arrived here and was like, I'm going to make what I'm saying slightly less spicy. So I think it's really amazing that there is a level of awareness and that is growing more and more. People are curious about this, but there's still a whole host of misconceptions that me as a non-monogamous person, I kind of have to experience all the time. It's not like a major thing, but there is like a low-level judgment and disbelief and an assumption of what my life looks like when actually it doesn't look like that. I'm not having orgies all the time, only sometimes. Thank you. But also that's not what this is about. Sorry, I'm like, it can be a fun sexual thing. It often is, but also that's not like the reason that I do this. And that's often what like I'm met with, of going like, oh, okay, the sex, cool, fair enough. A little bit, but also all this other stuff that I think is wonderful and not explored as often. And there are some people, we know that there are like 7.5 non-monogamous people in the UK at the very least. But the latest YouGov polling that came out in January let's do a little guessing thing as well. Let's keep the teacher energy up. Can you guess how many people in the UK have been polyamorous at some point in their lives? Percentage-wise, if you feel brave, just shout it out. 2 to 20. I like that range. 5. You're warm. It's 4%. Ta-da! So that's not a huge amount of people. 4% is like broken down. 3% of people have tried it at some point in the past. 1% of people are currently doing that. And that isn't, actually, I need to get my numbers because I always forget this. 4% of the UK population is not a lot of people, but it's also loads of people. It's 2.7 million people. That is the population of Greater Manchester being polyamorous. That's quite cool. I, as kind of someone who's into this and kind of like wants to track how doing relationships in different ways grows and evolves and changes. And then, 83% of the population are like, no, that's not for me. That is completely fair enough. But there's also this 7% of people who are curious to try. Some of you raised your hands and you're a part of that group. And that is, where is it? That's 4.7 million people, which is almost the population of Ireland. We are talking about quite a lot of people. And this is not something that we've grown up with, thinking that this is allowed. So I am going to bet, I don't know, we're a pretty liberal bunch. Probably one of you had like a eccentric polyamorous parent. Yeah, I feel like someone in the room has got that. But for most of us, we were brought up in an environment that was mononormative, deeply, deeply mononormative, and we still exist in that. You might have heard the phrase heteronormative, which is the idea that kind of, cis heteronormative, so cisgender and heterosexuality, like that's the kind of default, and if you're deviating or doing anything different, it's this big deal. Hopefully that's becoming less of an issue, but sadly the reality is that that change isn't happening as fast as I'd like it to. Mononormativity is like heteronormativity, sort of like quiet, sneaky twin, where we don't think of it as much as prevalent. And yet, this assumption that what a successful relationship looks like is 2 people, it is exclusive, it is valued and judged on how long a relationship has gone on for, rather than the fulfillment or the happiness or the kind of satisfaction of the people involved. It's M&S meal deals for 2. It's train lines having like a discount for couples. It's like financial benefits of being in like a 2-person relationship that is recognized by the state. Now, not all of that is a bad thing, but it also creates lots of problems for people who are single or people who are doing things in like a slightly different way. And I softly, kindly try to challenge why we still have this assumption that that is the only way to do relationships and to be happy in relationships. Because for me and lots of other people, it just isn't. That's like, this is one option of many. So I stumbled into polyamory in like a very accidental way. A decade ago, I was on a dating app and was speaking to someone who had polyamorous in their bio. I had never heard that word before, and I had to Google it, and I was like, okay, I'm a curious person. Maybe let's see. Like, I'll go on a date with this person and see what it's like. And I ended up having a sort of 8-month-long relationship with this person and their partner, sort of being like a fly on the wall, witnessing their relationship and being able to ask all the like nosy questions, and also kind of being a part of it as well. It was a sort of soft landing where I was just flitting in and it was a casual thing, but also we all had really nice feelings for each other. And when that ended, there was enough curiosity that I was like, no, come on, I'm going to go away and like read about this, see if I can find other people out there who are doing a similar thing, and if I can build this into my life. And since then, I have done so many different versions of this. In the book, I break down like all the different ways that you can be non-monogamous. There's like cheating, which is the unethical side. There's a whole chapter on that, but like that's not what I'm doing. That's not what we're doing. But of the sort of more consensual, communicative versions of non-monogamy, there are so many different ways of doing this. I was trying to think about, I think I've done like, of the relationship styles I talk about in the book, I think I've done 8 over a decade, like dipping in and out, trying to find, like, having my own little Goldilocks journey. And I think that's a super beautiful thing of me recognizing how I want to relate is something that might change and evolve over time. But none of this was stuff that I had any information on. So that's why I think it's really important that people write and talk about and make art about different ways of being. Because currently our representation is terrible. Let me get my little list out again. This is like the sort of information that is readily available about non-monogamy. Right now, we have got terrible documentaries that make me cringe. Louis Theroux, he's all right, but the polyamory documentary he made was one of the most embarrassing things, and I had to rewatch it when I was writing this book, and I physically wanted to like peel my skin off. It was so excruciating, because a lot of the media is made for people who are not part of this subculture, and so it kind of feels a bit like being a bug under a microscope and people looking at you and going like, ooh, what's that? What are they doing? And I get that we need sort of art and, you know, entertainment that is for the masses, but I really crave a bit more that's kind of made by and for us and opening the door from the inside, if that makes sense. We've also got reality TV, which, you know, I love rubbish TV. I love like shouting at my telly and messaging my friends and getting like really obsessed with whatever the latest series is. Love is Blind was like the only thing I could talk about for 2 months. However, I'm very fascinated by how all of these love reality shows rely on non-monogamy to create drama. So the association that many of you might have with this is that it's like messy and unnecessary and it brings out the worst in people and all this like jealousy and rage. And I think like shows like Love Island, Love is Blind, all of this kind of like feeds off of that. And it's almost like non-monogamy is being judged, but through a very monogamous lens, where still the end game is one true love, soulmate, forever, lock it down, and let's forget about all that like horrible, messy drama. So don't love that. We have like a lot of American books as well. And no, if anyone is American, no major, actually no, sort some stuff out, please. But I'm not going to be super kind to that. But I can't quite articulate how there's such a difference in the way that Americans talk about polyamory. There's a smugness that I feel quite allergic to, and a bit of a superiority, and it's like very, very theory-based in a way that doesn't feel super accessible to people. And some of that bleeds into the UK. A lot of the books that we have available to us now, like to me and my community, is quite sort of earnest therapy speak, helpful, but a bit boring, or wildly over-sensationalized memoir, which can be helpful, but again, I'm like, I've spent years like figuring out what was missing, and I basically tried to do it. And I do stand by this. I think it's a nice book. I want to kind of hold your hand, but also present things in a way that might surprise you, I guess. A couple final things. Where are we for time? We've got fab. I'm going to share as many of these before we then need to do some questions, because I feel like maybe some of you have some burning questions, and I'm going to give you permission to like ask the nosy question if you would like to. So some of the kind of like key components of the book that I want to share now. First of all, this idea of love as a finite resource. This is something that, again, kind of links to this like mononormative culture. The scarcity model is like an economic model. Don't worry, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to try and explain this super well. But the idea that kind of the more of a resource, the less valuable it becomes. So when we think about this in terms of our relationships and our capacity to feel emotion, we already do this in like platonic relationships, family, colleagues, like all the ways that we kind of share emotion. We don't have like a cap of how many friends we can have or family members. And yet when we put that onto romance or sex, it's like, oh, hell no. There's like, we've got to stick to one, especially for the romance. People get very, very panicked about that. And actually the way that I tried to describe this to my mum, like 9-10 years ago, was that idea that when, also with this analogy, I am aware that like the love that you have for your kids isn't the same as the love that you have for someone that you're in a relationship with, but interesting parallel. When my mum had me and then she was pregnant again, she was really nervous about like if she would have enough love to give this next kid, or that she'd have to like cut the love that she had for me in half to kind of spread it out. And then she had this second kid, who's a little legend, and was like, oh yeah, obviously this is elastic and I've got enough and it's gonna like wrap around both of you, and like my love is expansive and isn't this finite resource. And yet we still are quite governed by this idea that like we only have enough love, and if we kind of give it to the wrong person, then it's going to run out in some kind of way. And I really try and challenge that in the book of what it would look like if we did things in a more expansive way. I'm not going to do that one. Next, the most important thing is about messiness and embracing it, and embracing the uncertainty of relationships in general, because I've spent a lot of my life as an educator and also as someone in these kinds of relationships feeling like I have to perform well enough for monogamous people to believe that this can work and believe that this can be legitimate. And yet, when I kind of get vulnerable enough with people, I realize that we're all panicked about if we're doing relationships right, and scared to admit the things that aren't going right for us right now. I think everyone in this room has stuff going on in their love lives, in their sex lives, that they'd be too scared to admit to a friend. And that's okay. We can hold all of that, and we can all kind of acknowledge that we have our own versions of that. That's a really powerful thing. But while trying to give lots of kind of guides and tools and resources that you can use, I also feel really strongly about sticking with mess and us not trying to be perfectionists in the way that we live or the way that we love, because this is inherently messy, and like change is a beautiful thing, evolution is a beautiful thing, and I think if we lent more into that rather than trying to be the kind of perfect people, the perfect partner, the perfect lover, we'd end up having a bit more fun. And hopefully the aim of all of this is to have fun for the time that we're around. Finally, I want to introduce you to relationship anarchy, which immediately panics people sometimes because it makes me feel like I'm going to sort of like run around and burn something. I don't know. Relationship anarchy is a term that is used as like one way of kind of identifying and defining relationships, and it's built on anarchic principles. So the idea that no relationship kind of follows a preset of rules, and it's very much determined by the agreements made by the people involved. It's like the most hardcore mode of choose your own relationship, kind of like build your own style thing. And I have become more and more curious about this in recent years, because I think it can kind of be a uniter between monogamy over here and non-monogamy over here, and both of us on our high horses kind of saying that actually what we're doing is better. Relationship anarchy is about the way that we relate to everyone in our lives, and trying to like lift up friendship and those other types of relationships that we don't give much airtime to, but really like build the foundation of our lives. I've been working with Field, which is a kind of alternative dating app. They're like the dating app for the curious. And we have a report coming out next week, which is all about relationship anarchy. We surveyed a load of people, and across like monogamous and non-monogamous people who identify with this terminology and kind of how they build relationships, time and time again, statistically, experience less loneliness. So I guess I kind of want to leave you with that of whatever you're doing in your romantic life, how do all of the other relationships that you have in your life sit within it, sit amongst it, and can you have more agency and choice in the way that you design all of your relationships, like the whole messy plethora of them, to have a more enriched life, to feel more connection, to feel less kind of isolated and alone. Because I don't think it's like a monogamy or non-monogamy battle here. I think we're all like working towards the same thing, just doing it in slightly different ways, and maybe one of us having slightly more orgies, but only slightly.